All right, well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming today. We are super excited to have one of our own presenting today. So this is Seong Ji. She's a postdoc here at the College of OSU. She works closely with Josh Holly. There he is at OERC. Second year in your postdoc here, right? At OSU. And she's going to be presenting some exciting research that's going on older adults. So I'll turn it over to you.
Hello, everyone. Nice to see you in person. So let me introduce my research background a little bit before I present everything. My name is Seong Ji, and I've got a degree in workforce development and vocational education and home engineering research 2 years ago. And I joined OERC, and I'm working with Dr. Josh Holly and our research team I had some projects on these projects. And today I'm going to talk about career trajectories, gradual retirement, and late life financial security of age others. I'm going to start by introducing my research interest, which is association between education and work. So I was born in rural side. And as a female, I sometimes confront the disparity between the rural area and urban area, and maybe it has some disparity in terms of education infrastructure and occupational status, and that is sometimes succeeding intergenerationally. So I have questioned the role of education and social policies to tackle this issue. So I got attracted by workforce development and career development because it suggests smooth transition from education and work. So I personally approach workforce development as a institutional perspective to advance regional or national human resource development. And I also approach career development at the personal level, especially for those who transition between school, work, and retirement. So today I'm gonna talk about gradual retirement and financial security from this institutional and personal perspectives. And the research I'm going to talk about today is based on this research article, which was published in Longitudinal and Life Course Studies last June. You can find more information here on this website. And okay, let's get started. So my research question comes from aging workforce. According to ILO report, by 2030, 55 to 64-year-olds will make up more than a quarter of the global workforce. So this brings a consistent demand of labor in terms of contractual retirement or post-retirement employment. But my question is that are their retirement employments stable? So that is the question of beginning of my research. And this figure shows you the temporary employment trend for 65 plus workers. And you see that the South Korea is the top of the OECD's temporary employment for aged adults. This is almost 4 times greater than the average of OECD rates. And what's more surprising is that Korea has one of the highest elderly poverty rates in OECD countries, which is 45%. About 45% of the age group is living on less than 50% of the median disposable income. And you see that that is around twice greater than US and Japan, which is 23 and 20%. So we can expect the Korean aged workers may face uncertain employment and poverty rates at the same time in this aging workforce era. So all these reasons, I focused on 2 original aspects. First is that extended career trajectories, starting from their main job and their post-main job. I will talk about the main job terminology later in the slide. And although education, tenure, employment, all these things were examined to predict career trajectory, few studies only examined career trajectory patterns extended to their post-retirement employment. And the second thing I focused on is that late life financial security. We all know that differences in early and midlife work environment influence disparities in financial security later in life. So using all these questions, I thought of some research questions like how do middle-aged adults careers unfold over their lifetimes, and how are these career trajectory patterns associated with their late life financial security? So primarily, I focused on this literature review based on late life course perspective. So this is a holistic approach in understanding entry and exit between labor market and retirement. And it also includes work structure, job histories, and stage of life. Maybe it also includes your family life. So I focused on two different themes under this life course perspective. The first one is path dependency. This is really, really natural. The previous employment status or years of working, these things influence your late life career decisions and your patterns. And the second thing is the human agency within structure. Maybe this find it more interesting for you because for those who are transitioning or who are experiencing like life transition events, tend to have higher level of human agency compared to other people. However, all this human agency is restricted because where they are placed. For example, opportunities and restrictions of their social environment or their labor market structure. All these things are also characterize their career decision making. So that's why we call it human agency. However, within the structure. So using this human agency within structure framework, let us deep dive into our Korean labor market structure. So the first thing is that we also do have rigid labor market structure. In late 1990s, we had a great economic recession, including IMF, resulting in structural downsizing, outsourcing, and layoffs. So the baby boomers who experienced this recession in their earlier stages are more likely to face a precarious pattern in old age. And also gender and education, that is also like the major forces to the segmentation. Maybe women are more precarious in getting more stable jobs. And also like having an entry job as a temporary work, this also like decides your late career decision and late life. Maybe you just stick to temporary employment over your lifetime because this is so rich labor market structure. And also unique pattern is that you see the self-employment is really distinct among mid-aged adults. So 22% of mid-aged adults choose self-employment, maybe become like more like restaurant or cafe and own their own restaurant, something like that. So this is kind of really prevalent pattern, uniquely in Korean labor market structure. However, I also thought of some kind of human capital and career development perspective in terms of a human agency level. So your work experience, tenure, education, these things also like decide your like human agency. And I also thought of kind of the career alignment. Career alignment between your lifetime main job with your post-main job. This will be also kind of human agency level, like along with work satisfaction and voluntary turnover. So in this section, I like to talk about more in detail about Korean labor market, especially contractual retirement in Korea. So maybe you're not familiar with this contractual retirement terminology. Along with Japan, it's a cultural norm for Korea that once someone stay in a main job lifetime rather than like switching their jobs frequently. So I know that American people like to like switch over their jobs and increase their salary, but it's not the norm in Korea or Japan. So we call it the main job, which is a job of a long duration within one's lifetime before retirement. And the major feature of the retirement is contractual retirement. So this is it has a set age where everybody needs to contractually retire from their main job. And you see the average, the contractual retirement by numbers this occurs at average 49.3, according to this Korean statistics, so which is really, really early in your stage. And it also depends on your gender and firm types. Maybe male workers more stay longer than female workers, and public firms or institutions tend to hold employees more longer than large or small to medium-sized enterprises. However, because this really occurs early in their life stage, so that's why we also call involuntary retirement. So even after this contractual retirement, most others will continue to do paid work because it happens really early in your age.
So can the firm actually let them go for being a certain age? Can it say once you hit age 50, you have to leave?
Yeah, right. So
Wow.
that is kind of our norm. Yeah.
Okay, and the firm is allowed to do that. They're allowed to.
Yeah, like so we have the age discriminatory atmosphere. Like
Yeah.
if people are really getting age, so it kind of norm that okay,
Yeah.
this person needs to be contractually retired or
Yeah.
honorably retired.
Yeah.
Those kinds of atmosphere,
Okay.
and then find another job, maybe unstable job.
Yeah. Okay, interesting.
But the problem is that like this is a really great disparity because like compared to the compared to their main job, post main job has really lack of instability, inconsistency. So part-time work, contractual work, manual work, or self-employment, those are like characterized by this kind of post main job. So that is the problem. So when you see this picture here, this is the you can see the age and contractual retirement happens at age 49.3. However, the labor market exit, meaning the actual retirement actually occurs at 72. So it's really sad that we have 20 years plus gap between this contractual and actual retirement. Of course, we do have national pension eligibility, like national pension plan for age 60 to 65. And then we also have this basic pension basic pension plan for elderly poverty, starting from age 65. The important thing is that how about the gap between this contractual retirement and their pension plan? So that is the really big gap and like blind spot, I think. So that's why I got interested in this research. So using this late life financial security, maybe for stable workers, this is not so much problem because they have their greater human agency, and they also have their own voluntary reasons to do paid work, because they also have maybe like alternative plans like savings or accumulated for wealth. So this is not so much problem to find like paid work after retirement. However, for precarious workers, paid work after retirement is necessary due to financial concerns. And of course, I mentioned that there is non-contributory national basic pension plans for 65 plus others. Surprisingly, over a half people receive these national basic pension plans in Seoul. However, the problem is that it only makes up a quarter of a single household minimum cost of living. So that is the problem. So your pension is not sufficient income. You need to also find another paid work after that. So using all these context and literature review, I draw the following research questions. The first is that how do middle-aged adults' career unfold over their lifetimes? Secondly, how the institution level, such as labor market structure characterized by gender, education, occupational level, as well as individual agency level, such as career alignment or voluntary turnover, contribute to the patterning of middle-aged adults' career trajectories in Korea. And third question is that how are these career trajectory patterns associated with their later life financial security? Before I like to begin any methodology, do you have any questions? Okay.
Do companies offer pensions at all, or is it all public?
So in Korea, we have national pension plans. So like there is a like private pension plan as well. Maybe like large firms tend to provide some kind of private pension plan. But this is only internal labor market things, so this is not so much like prevalent in Korea. Okay. So, and to answer these questions, I used the data source funded by Seoul 50 Plus Foundation, and this foundation is funded by City of Seoul, and they collected 1,010 45 to 78 contractual retirees in Seoul, and they also collected retirement, income, health, wealth, wellness, and job history, etc. And when you see this job history, all the respondents, 1,000 respondents have main job history, plus a first post main job history, and only some of them has like a second or third post main job history. So this is the measures that I used as a research. So you see the socio-demographic attributes, I use gender. Gangnam is the wealthiest district. So I use Gangnam versus not as a location, resident location. Female versus not, marital status or not, parental status or not. I also like holding bachelor's degree or above versus not. I also use main job characteristics. These are like kind of labor market structure characteristics. And I also use financial satisfaction, work satisfaction, voluntary retirement, and career alignment. That's kind of characterized by as like human agency structure. And maybe this is one of the like trickiest parts to explain how I coded the career trajectory. So okay, let's start. First, I made a matrix of individual ID, starting from ID 1 to 1,010, and I also coded individual state sequence state of their employment, starting from age 17 to 70. The reason why I chose 17 was the first observance of to detect a main job, any kind of main job in our respondent. And the 70 was the oldest age of respondents. So their individual ID has a response value in each cell of age, either permanent, temporary, self-employed as a main job. Here, main job. And another permanent, temporary, self-employment as a post-main job. And I also coded like other inactive, unemployed plus inactive. So other represent subsequent post-main jobs, like second or third post-main job. And how I differentiate with inactive or unemployed or plus inactive will not be covered in this presentation, but I can talk about it more in detail after I do this presentation with you. And there's also censored data. So censored data is that if you are age 66, you will have the censored data from 67 to 70. So in this way, all the individuals have the same length of sequence state, because like sequence analysis is really sensitive to the length of the matrix. That's why I use the censored data as well. So for example, this ID1 start from inactive status from age 17 to 23, and then he got like unemployed and inactive status. So maybe this person graduated from high school and also got bachelor's degree, and then this person was looking for a job until 27, and then got their main job as a permanent, and then got the post main job as a self-employment. And it's censored because this person's age is 66. So in this way, I put it all the individuals up to 1,010 respondents. And using this career trajectory patterning, I also use late life financial security as my dependent variable. So the first two is the objective measures, monthly load earnings and the total load assets, post-contractual retirement, and I also use subjective financial preparedness, post-contractual retirement. And about the procedure here, analytical procedure, first I did data cleaning and sequence analysis and cluster analysis. And then I first I first explored all the career trajectory patterns. And then I also examined the factors affecting career trajectory patterns using demographic and main job characteristics. And the last thing is I examined the association between his career trajectory patterns and late life financial security using these properties. So I think some of you may heard the first time sequence analysis or cluster analysis. So just giving you a little bit background of the sequence analysis. I prepared this slide. So sequence analysis is used to explore the sequence of individual states. Maybe it can become employment or education or family life over time. And actually this was first used in the medical area to explore the DNA structure. However, it is more widely used in social science area, in sociology. So I chose this method considering that individual's career is path dependent. Naturally, their prior work or family experience influence their later life decisions. And furthermore, my sample is really aged others. So maybe they have extended employment history. So that's why I wanted to give you like a snapshot of career trajectory from their main to post-main jobs. And how I use this analysis is that I first use optimal match. The optimal matching method is that it examines the degree of similarity and dissimilarity, and then it reorders the samples by similar patterns set together along these individual sequences. So using this rearrange the data, I then use hierarchical clustering to identify the distinct groups with similar patterns. So using my samples, this is kind of sequence analysis wizard of total samples. So when you see the sequence index plot, this indicates individual state distribution. So when you see this y-axis, this is the ID number 1 to 1010. This is individual state frequencies. So and it starts from age 17 to like 70. And when you see this chronogram, this is kind of a little bit different because this is only represents a cumulative percentage of like individual state at each time unit. So this is not necessarily longitudinal, but this is more cross-sectional. But you can see more like distinctively what which coding scheme has more patterns here like over time. So when you see this like overall sequence index plot and chronogram, you see that maybe it starts from inactive status, and then it changes to maybe like permanent is the main job here, and then maybe gradually move to yellow and orange one, which is permanent as a post main job, self-employment as a main job, and then it also has sensory data status. And using all these sequence like with a similar patterns, I use cluster analysis, hierarchical clustering analysis to determine the proper number of clusters in the end. So I use I computed the clustering quality statistics. That's how I elaborate this. So when like at various level of aggregation, we look at the quality of partitions as well as theoretical clarity. So in order to determine the number of clusters, when you just solely considering the statistics here, it always results that you're like the large number or like the small number of clusters will be appropriate because it represents only the stability. So I decided to adopt a fixed cluster approach as the most theoretically meaningful distinction and the most informative compromise between several matrices. So I can give you more explanation maybe after the presentation, because my highlight is not this, but my research here. Yeah. So when you see the contract to retirement, this is the like criteria, and this is the main job. This is the post main job, And you see that permanent self-employment and temporary this kind of status in each job history. So my pattern research is like the first three is stable career patterns. You see that permanent to permanent trajectory, self-employment to self-employment, permanent to self-employment. These are expressed by a stable pattern. And when you see this permanent to temporary or temporary to churning, churning means like inconsistent. Churning trajectory, they are relatively unstable career trajectory patterns. So I wanted to see more details about these six distinct career trajectory patterns. So this is the sequence index plot. For example, when you see this permanent to self-employment trajectory, you see that inactive status is a pink, and first they start as a permanent, really long time, right? And then they switch to self-employment, and then maybe center. However, when you see this turning trajectory, it starts from maybe a little bit of inactive, but the gray part is actually unemployable plus the inactive status. So they tend to stay more longer in this inconsistent trend. And they also have a little bit variety of switching class patterns. So you can see this kind of distinct pattern, distinct career trajectory pattern overall in the sequence index plot. And this is kind of chronograph. Maybe this is more a bit colorful and distinctive. And you can see like how it is really different of their career trajectories over time, right? So I can only give you highlights of each trajectory pattern. So the permanent to self-employment trajectory, you see over 30% of the entire sample are here in this curve. So this is most prevalent, and you see that over 50% of the entire males are in this curve. And it also has the longest job duration of post-contract retirement, meaning that they're having a stable job history post-contract retirement. And when you switch to self-employment history, distinct pattern is that evenly distributed gender can be found here. And however, they have the biggest difference in earnings. So their main job earnings are much more greater than their post-main job earnings. Third one is permanent to permanent trajectory. Maybe this was the most stable career trajectory pattern because they are prevalent by the highly educated people, and they maybe switch to another stable work relatively in earlier ages. And they also have like similar earnings across the main and post-main jobs here. And this was kind of like stable jobs, stable career trajectory pattern. And when you see these like green boxes here, this starts from like unstable career trajectory pattern. You see like lots of gray area, unemployed plus inactive. So they are kind of like unstable itself. And they are dominated by women and the low educated. And they also have all these for the delayed, most delayed main job start date and 37, which is so late. And when you see these like temporary to turning career trajectory pattern, it also prevalent by female and the low educated. However, they have like main job start age at the oldest at 26. Like Korean people tend to delay their job or having a job because they want to have a highly educated and then getting a job after that. So I think this is really different than American society. So 26 really, really oldest, I think. And however, they have a short retention. And when you see that their main job age and their post-main job age, it has a 10 years of gap, meaning that they are focusing on childcare or housework in between, and then they have a post-main job. And the sixth one is turning trajectory. Overall, it has greatest variety in switching jobs here. And it also has longest data in inactive, the gray one, and unemployed one. And it also has the lowest earnings here overall. So you see like the distinct features of each career trajectory pattern. And now the research question two, I use multinomial logistic analysis because I wanted to see the factors affecting determining the career trajectory patterns. And the main finding is that labor market was segmented. I found that evidence because when you see the female here, the row female, this was really a significant predictor in determining each career trajectory pattern here. When you see this female, like maybe being a female decreased the probability of getting into a stable career trajectory pattern, while being female increased the probability of belonging to this unstable career trajectory pattern. So you see that the labor market is severely segmented by this gender, and also highly educated, like the education also was the prevalent significant predictor to determine each career trajectory pattern. So maybe highly educated people increase the probability of getting into the stable career trajectory pattern, while decrease the probability of belonging to unstable career trajectory pattern. However, I found a really breaking pattern, which is closer to self-employment to self-employment, because when you see self-employment to self-employment career trajectory, being female increase the probability of getting into this self-employment group. So I found that gender segmentation at least plays only a little role in this particular pattern, which is self-employment to self-employment. And another finding is that I also found an evidence of human agency level. So demographic characteristics actually was included all these things, but I cut it off. So when you see like the career alignment operationally, this is alignment between your main job and your post main job. So if you have a career alignment plus the career alignment increase the probability of getting into permanent to self-employment career trajectory. However, this career alignment, if you are lack of career alignment, meaning minus, this increase the probability of getting into the self-employment to self-employment. So even though they end up with self-employment trajectory, their human agency level is different. So maybe if like permanent, if you start as a permanent worker, maybe you can accumulate your human capital, and using your social networking strategy, you can also make your own business in the end as a self-employment. That is a cluster one. So they maybe they can make best use of their career alignment between their main job and post main job. That's why they have this kind of significant evidence here. However, if you start as a self-employment, so just randomly picking up any industry, and if you do not earn any enough money, so that's why you switch to different self-employment job. That is kind of the evidence here, because like career alignment decrease the probability of getting into self-employment to another self-employment. So my finding was that people in similar fields throughout their lives show the most stable career path. This is obvious and natural, but I found that evidence here in this sample. So if you have any questions, you can ask. Okay.
Well, by way of clarification, I was puzzled at the use of the term sensor. Does it mean that you can no longer have data available on people beyond age 67? Is that what censoring means?
Yeah, that's correct.
So how can you go up to 70 then, if you think that data is censored?
Because like the respondents only collectively representatively from age 45 to 70.
Okay.
So there is no respondents up to 70.
Okay. And the second clarification, say you have had a permanent job and you are forced to retire. How do I imagine self-employment? What is that? Do people create a job themselves or? I mean, what is self-employment?
Maybe self-employment is really prevalent in Korea.
Is that also voluntary work? Because I know,
So self-employment originally in this study is that anyway, they need to make a money out of it. So it's not about just activity or volunteer work, but maybe they're making money from working in a cafe, like starting a cafe or restaurant or that kind of
oh,
food accommodation, something like that industry. That is also like characterized by self-employment, or they can also work as a like freelancer.
so self-employment could be in the United States, something like after retirement, being a greeter at Walmart.
Or
Probably would be, yeah, I don't think that would be self-employed. Do they have to be, like, would they be working in the restaurant as an employee or would they be owning the restaurant?
employer, yeah, employer.
Employer,
Yeah.
so they'd have to own the restaurant.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
It'd be self.
Yeah, starting your own catering business.
okay.
But there are lots of cafes actually, lots of restaurants in Korea.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
I know.
that's why they are employer actually.
Okay, I know, okay.
And the research question 3 was that I wanted to examine the association between the career trajectory pattern and the late life financial security. So that's why I use 3 different proxies. First is monthly load earnings post the contractual retirement. And the second one, total load assets. And the third one is financially prepared post contractual retirement. So I'm not talking about more in detail because I am running out of time.
Okay.
So maybe the focus is really important thing is that monthly earnings post the contractual retirement. It's talking about earned income, like earned income here. So when you see this table, this is the regression business. So I use outcome variable, which is monthly loaded earnings post the contractual retirement. And so this is the first, only I use the first, only one model, but I changed different categories as a reference because I wanted to compare the coefficient among these 6 distinct career trajectory patterns. So it has a reference group differently. So in this way, I was able to see which trajectory versus which trajectory has a disparity the most. For example, the greatest disparity between career trajectory 1, which is permanent to self-employed, versus reference group that is cluster 4, permanent to temporary trajectory. That was the largest disparity. And I also find some similar trend, maybe stable career trajectories 1, 2, and 3 has earned more loaded earnings post the contractual retirement than unstable career trajectory patterns. So you see that stable career trajectory patterns are associated with greater earnings even after their career contractual retirement. And similar trend was found in when I used total assets. So I changed my dependent variable to total assets here, and you see like the greatest disparity was found first between this permanent to permanent trajectory versus this reference group, which was permanent to temporary, and the disparity between this permanent to permanent trajectory versus turning trajectory. Yeah, turning trajectory. So I would say stable career trajectory patterns are associated with also greater total assets post contractual retirement. And my last outcome was that perceiving like their subjective financial preparedness post contractual retirement. You see, this is the logistic regression result because it's binary, and you see that compared to the permanent to self-employment trajectory, permanent to temporary trajectory increase probability of perceiving financially prepared by 17.3%. So meaning that unstable career trajectory patterns are less likely to be prepared financially post-contractual retirement. Any questions?
Have you determined contractual retirement when somebody's self-employed?
Thinking about that.
So
That's a really critical question, I think. Okay, so that's a really great question. Yeah. Actually, self-employment has no retirement. However, like I operationally define contractual retirement to distinguish the main job and post main job. So if you have a main job as a self-employed and you switch to another self-employed job, that's how I differentiate it. So first employment is a main job before contractual retirement. And then the second self-employed job, this is the post main job after their contractual retirement. So like logically it does not make sense, but I wanted to make this clarification like using the general and the specific. Thank you for that. So my conclusion in this question are as follows. So first finding is that there is a disparity between stable and unstable career trajectory patterns. Obviously, stable patterns were found in males, highly educated, higher earnings, career alignment, whereas precarious patterns were found among females, less dedicated, lower earnings, longer career breaks, and they also tend to end up with low quality and insecure occupations post contractual retirement. And the second finding is that women, focusing on women, they experience greater discontinuity of work history over their career even after their retirement, post contractual retirement. So we found that the longer career break due to their housework, childcare, and a higher social atmosphere. And like so far the thing is that so like among this female, you see that the cluster 4 and cluster 5 has like distinct pattern because if you start as a main job, as a permanent, the start date is really delayed, 37. However, they relatively switch to relatively stable temporary work. Whereas when you see the temporary to turning, even though they start their job as a main job, really only the moment, they switch to this turning, that discontinuous work history after that. And it also characterized by parental rate. And I also want to highlight the self-employment status because stable main jobs come with self-employment in later stages. So when you see the cluster 1 and 2, which is permanent to self-employment and self-employment to another self-employment, even though they end up with self-employment because their prior history, job history, was relatively stable. And this was majority of males. However, I found that the distinct feature between these two in terms of career alignment. So I think I already mentioned this before. So self-employment, they had like lower career consistency, thus making lower earnings post-contractual retirement. But permanent to self-employment, because they start at a stable job and using their like human capital and social networking strategy, they are having like higher career consistency later in their stage as a self-employed, and then they also all earn higher earnings post-contractual retirement. Regardless of these things, anyway, self-employment still is a decent option for living. To secure life financial security. However, I need to also recognize that there is a concern on the oversupply of self-employment labor market in Korea. So lots of people open their restaurant, office, and like Airbnb stuff. So that's really the problem. So maybe a thorough analysis of profitability for regional like those kinds of things also need to be considered when someone really wants to open up their own business. So the last thing is that precarious career trajectory patterns are associated to late life financial uncertainty. For especially like elderly people with precarious career trajectory patterns tend to be exposed to elderly poverty. They have insufficient savings and assets, and maybe their basic pension only starts at age 65. So that is the blind spot. Maybe they need to do more paid work, 2 jobs, 3 jobs at the same time. This is the really problem. So I thought of some support, like organizational support and institutional support. So that maybe from firms, the government, retirement benefits can be optimized or individualized, especially for single female seniors or those on lower incomes, making options for accumulating pension entitlements from institutional support. And also, I thought of some elders employment services, maybe suggesting them to make optimal use of accumulated skills and work experiences. So maybe we can also open up job searching tool for them, elderly poverty, so that they can also use their maximum accumulated skills and work experiences to find a better job. And organizational support from like for firms proactively preparing for a post-contractor job line if their main career will be needed. Maybe also expanding career retirement age at firms will be also considered. And also I thought of like relaxing the age discriminatory atmosphere will also be necessary. So this is kind of an example of Korean case. So I thought of some kind of implications for US market, job market. Maybe I didn't use household income data because there was like 20 response rate of income, because income consists of lots of different sources. But like in overall, only like it was only make up 20% of response rate, so I was not able to use that. But further research can use this as a late life financial security. And the two last indication is that maybe exploring the career trajectory of our military veterans, maybe starting from their enrollment, their discharge, and their further career, maybe also be examined. And so maybe we can also find out their individual career trajectory patterns to better support according to their history. Also be kind of another research topic. Maybe also exploring the education and career trajectory of immigrants. That'll be also a good suggestion, because I see international students from wealthy and highly educated parents. However, on the other hand, they also have like some of them also working in informal sectors as well. So maybe exploring their career and education trajectory and finding their distinct pattern among them will also be necessary in terms of like US policy and sort of intervention. So that is the end of my presentation. Any questions or?
What's a fun? Yeah. We have a few minutes for questions. Lots of questions. I'll start off with one. You've started to say at the end there, but the households aspect I think is really important. So I wondered if you thought, it sounded like you wouldn't be able to do it with these data, but like if it's the career trajectories, even though you're controlling for marital status, if it's a woman and two people together and one person's career trajectory is really stable and the other one has the ability to be unstable because the other one is stable, like they might complement each other, and you might end up fine later on. And so you might be interviewing or looking at the respondent data for the unstable person. But if they have a stable person as a partner, they might end up okay in the end. So have you thought about like thinking about this kind of joint job? There's a lot of literature in the labor economics that talks about like the joint labor decisions in households. And then you also think about like longer term financial security as a function of these joint labor decisions.
Wow, that's a great suggestion. I think maybe I can change the data analysis unit to household, and then I can also use maybe multi-channel sequence analysis. So this is the single tenor
Yeah,
analysis,
yeah.
but I also can use their family decisions on the one hand and their labor like their employment trend on the other hand. And also I can also change to analysis unit for not individual but household. Then I think I can make those kind of targets. Thank you for this.
So you mentioned education, very good. If somebody, there's a linear assumption that you do education up to the age of 26 and then you enter the labor market. Does anybody ever go back and pursue education? And if so, does that show up in your churn category?
So you mean that?
So here in the, I'm biased to the experience of the United States, where often someone will do an undergraduate degree and then go work, and then come back and get a graduate professional degree, and then that changes the trajectory for some of those
Yeah,
folks.
that's a great question. That's my another interest actually, and I think this is the baby boomer generation. So I don't think they have lots of variation in switching jobs and education. Maybe they start first education and then go to labor market, and they rather just stay in the labor market rather than going back to their education. But that is kind of characteristics of baby boomer generation. But when you see like maybe MZ generation or like M generation, maybe that pace will be more prevalent. So that can be also captured in a separate category.
So in your data here, if someone were to have done that, would that be in that churn category where they were in a permanent job and then they exited? And we don't know where they went. They could have gone to get education.
That could be the case. However, I also need to mention like the limitation of my research because I didn't want. Okay. So this is the coding logics of our labor force data. This is kind of appendix. So this was retrospective data. So it was. So they just remembered when they entered the first job and exited the first job and entered the second job and second job, and they didn't respond to like any in education history after getting a first job. So actually, that is kind of my limitation. Maybe that is the correct. That is the answer.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's good.
Questions and thoughts?
And Seong Ji's on the job market too, right? Right now,
Yeah.
is this gonna be your job market paper, do you know?
Yeah,
or-
I think so.
So yeah, so if you have any suggestions or questions
Yeah.
too, with that in mind, I think that would be super helpful, because I thought you did an amazing job of presenting this in a really easy to understand way. But I don't know if others have thoughts or suggestions, or questions still. It's a quiet group today.
Well, I have a question. And I hope it doesn't come across as too critical, because I liked your presentation. But can you tell me what gap in knowledge you are filling? Because some of the conclusions struck me as, yes, I can expect this lower income, higher uncertainty, or financial insecurity as you're getting older, and that there is a differentiation between males and females. So I see some commonsensical information confirmed, and the confirmation itself, you've done a great job. But what gap in knowledge, was this not investigated in Korea and also India, or?
Thank
You see what I
for
mean?
asking that question. Yeah. I agree that my conclusion is kind of in like common. But when you think of like first, like my research approach, the beginning. So actually, I wanted to highlight the human agency level. So of course, we have lots of evidence, like the rigid Korean labor market structure, characterized by gender and education. That is kind of the existing conclusion. But I also wanted to add my contribution to how I'm thinking of human agency level. That's why I included the career alignment and voluntary turnover, or as well along with like work satisfaction and financial satisfaction. So that was kind of another conclusion actually, but I just didn't mention this. because of the legal time. But thank you for the.
Great. Any other questions or 1 minute left? Yeah, Josh.
Yeah, I mean. This came home to me just when I was in, doing my Fulbright last year and I was in Thailand. And I kept getting questions about, what the government can do more actively to support, people who have been forcibly retired. And it feels so weird in the US context, because I can't remember what year we got rid of mandatory retirement in the US, it was the mid-70s, I think. But I wrote a paper with colleagues from MIT on this 15 years ago. What would have happened to US universities if the faculty had still had mandatory retirement? And it would have meant a lot more jobs for young people, which is basically the point. So I think the retirement thing cuts both ways. It opens up, and I think this is the way the Korean system would work. It opens up a lot of jobs for younger people, clears the pool, so to speak.
And is that the same case for people who work at universities? Because I know
Yeah.
some colleagues have been sold.
Yeah.
They have that contractual retirement as well.
Yes, they do. Yeah.
Oh,
So if you get a job.
I'm so glad I knew this.
And from US, PhD, like we did recently, and you get your postdoc and you go back to Korea, when you're 35 or whatever, you only have 15, 20 years of expected work contribution. That's all you can do. And then you have to look for another job.
I had a doctoral
This is a
student from
common
Korea.
issue. Lots of.
I had a doctoral student from Korea. He finished his thesis in his 40s because he started
Yeah.
and that degree. He's now just lecturing, and he's a really smart guy. Did a great thesis, but he couldn't get a job.
Yeah, but there's.
And now I understand.
Yeah.
Oh my
But
goodness.
this is not the only country where this is
Oh,
relevant,
this is-
even in countries, like, that are much less developed, like Thailand. They have fairly rigid kind of exit requirements for the best jobs. You have another question?
Because I would think I would do it. I work at a national research institute and there we get experience with and I see a lot of research problems and working with and I do this lecture, but in South Korea, professors are guaranteed until the age of 65. So we have different, different age where you're guaranteed your but I think the one you're talking about more applies to like firms or other sectors and the manufacturing. Retail, where you can a lot of price sensitive. Because like government jobs, they guarantee on prices. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, that's correct. If you're from South Korea, that's okay. So when you think of this current contract return by age, I didn't include public institutions, but colleges, they are maybe like 65. But this is a representative sample in Seoul. So not all the people are from public sectors. They are majorly from small to medium enterprise. So that's why I have a kind of 49.3 like on average, and also it was represented in my sample too. So that is also a good suggestion that maybe we could split by sectors or firm types. But I think that is kind of different research topics that we can do further research.
All right, well, that's one time, but please feel free to reach out to Sandy if you have any questions.